Hi, this is Marsha and it's Care today. We're discussing a really touchy topic. It's domestic violence, gender-based violence. Joining us today, we have Sharon Motley, of PSI Caribbean, and we have Raquel D'Souza of the Lamika Project. We're going to go straight into meeting our guest. I'm very excited about hearing all that PSI Caribbean's doing. Tell us, how did you get involved? Tell us, what is PSI Caribbean and how did you get involved?
Firstly, hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you beautiful ladies. PSI Caribbean is a global health organization. We're actually located in 67 countries across the globe. And PSI Caribbean focuses on the health needs of people generally. We've done work, or we are doing work in malaria, HIV prevention, sexual and reproductive health, as well as gender-based violence here in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2005, the Caribbean platform opened and we operated in 12 countries across the region, really looking at HIV prevention and condom social marketing, really getting to at-risk populations, very vulnerable communities around the issue of preventing HIV and sexual and reproductive health. In 2014, we began our gender-based violence project, really looking at prevention and working with survivors of gender-based violence, domestic violence, and intimate partner violence.
Great, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been in Trinidad?
So, as I said, we were in the region since 2005, but we've always been located, the platform's head office has been in Trinidad and Tobago for that period of time. So we celebrated our 10th anniversary last year, as well as we launched our Make It Stop campaign. If you could zoom in on my little heart right there, that's our Make It Stop campaign, which was really, again, looking at this thing called gender-based violence and how it's impacting lives in Trinidad and Tobago, not only of women, but also of men and boys and girls.
What is gender-based violence?
When we talk about gender-based violence, it is that violence that's perpetrated mainly on women and girls. Not that it does not happen to men, we have to say that, but it is mainly perpetuated on women and girls based on that whole notion of gender and the roles that females and males play. And then in Trinidad and Tobago, you would hear a lot about domestic violence, which is what happens in homes, as well as intimate partner violence, which happens in relationships. So you and I could be in a relationship. We don't have to be living in the same house, but we may have an intimate partner relationship, and because of the dynamics within that relationship, violence may result. And so when we talk about gender-based violence, it's that broad scope, but it encompasses all of these negative interactions between couples. And when we talk about couples, we mainly talk about male and female, but they could also happen within same-sex relationships.
So you're going to tell us a little bit about the policies that we have set in place in Trinidad for gender-based violence, and I know Raquel's going to jump in. So before we get there, because I know Raquel's going to jump in at that point, let's meet Raquel. Raquel, tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Marsha, of coming out here. I am here primarily because I tried really hard to survive domestic violence, and I thought that I should trust the system, and there were a lot of avenues to try and explain, what I was going through, but at the end of the day, I just kept getting the door closed and, not really seeing the results that I needed to. My kids, the main reason as well that Lamika was formed, I thought that we have to do something new. We have to find a new way to communicate the idea of solving domestic violence in the home. And there was a disconnect. I think that if I can help in that regard, that would be the best way really to move forward, because I'm still in my situation.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Lamika project?
Okay, well, the project is intended to become generally a public awareness / educational type campaign where, there's literally open dialogue where victims can come forward and express their concerns. And ideally, hopefully, see greater change in the immediate way in which domestic violence cases are assessed. I think that being 3 years in the system, I can say that if the policing at entry level, when some comes forward with a story, if it was dealt with more rigidly, whether it is at magistrates court, whether it is in the family court system, we're not going to see this level of violence escalate. The problem's not going to get out of hand. It has to be dealt with immediately, promptly, and more so when children are involved. They are dragged through a very unnecessary process. Whether it is one parent being unreasonable or two, they're both in it. Children are suffering too much.
Okay. So, and that's why, of course, that's why I said I know Raquel's going to jump in when we start to discuss what's in place, what's really in place. I know Raquel from before, and we've had a lot of discussions, Raquel, and I have a single moms group, and that allows me to meet a lot of women. In fact, that was born out of me meeting a lot of women who come with the same challenges. And, fortunately for me, I've not had to deal with domestic violence myself as a mother. But it's so unfortunate every single time I speak to a mother, and it seems as if what they're not getting is help. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of NGOs that offer after help. So there's counseling after the fact. There's, I'm a survivor, we're a survivor, great. But unfortunately, what it does not seem, and I may be wrong, and I'm hoping that you can tell me that I'm wrong, and I'm hoping that by the end of it, somebody can reach out and tell Raquel and I that we're wrong. But what I feel like is not happening is that we're not getting a lot of prevention. So, and that's not just abuse in terms of mother being abused by a father or mother abusing a father, whichever, but even for the child, until it becomes an issue, the police aren't stepping in. Until it becomes an issue, no one seems to be stepping in. And that's why we're seeing, okay, well, this one's battered, beaten to a pulp in the hospital, and then it's on the news, and then now everybody wants to come. In fact, I remember searching for help for one mother, for a young mother, and what I was told was, okay, well, family court's line is long, this line is long, that is long, that is long. And a private lawyer came out and said, well, if it's a really bad situation, we'll step in and help. And I said, well, why do we have to wait till it's a really bad situation? Why can't we help her before it becomes a really bad situation so that one person does not have to stop? And Raquel, I think that that's what your project, really is trying to do, sort of nip it in the bud. Why do we need to get to that stage?
And I think, and you see, this is the complexity of social issues in general. An issue like gender-based violence isn't an isolated sort of issue. It's a complex, endemic issue. What I mean by that is that gender-based violence didn't just start. It has been going on from generation to generation. Many of us, even if we ourselves haven't experienced violence, we know whether it was in our households and how it presented, and it could have presented in the way of verbal abuse, physical abuse. It was seen as normal. So when you talk to young people, they'll say, but moms or Auntie Sharon, that's normal, My son used to say normal, because they've grown up seeing this and thinking this is normal behavior. But PSI Caribbean, actually, that's what we saw as the gap. Because when we started this project in 2014, we decided what we wanted to do was to meet with people, meet with stakeholders to find out what already existed. We weren't going to use our limited funding to duplicate what was already being done. So we talked and we met with people over the course of 9 months or so. And really what we found as the gap was there was very little targeting young people specifically around the issue of prevention. And so out of that became our youth empowerment program. So we actually developed a 12-session.
Don't talk about that yet.
Okay. But
because you have a video and we want to put a whole segment for that.
Correct.
Because my passion is the youth.
And so in terms of the program overall, we kind of adopted an ecological model. So we're looking at addressing the problem on an individual level, on a societal level, on a community level, on a policy level, and really looking at what is needed at those different levels. And again, it's not, you can't have a one size fits all.
Agreed.
In terms of community interventions, For example, it's not, oh, let's develop an upgrade. We know how to come into your community, whether you're in Beach or Charlottesville or wherever, and fix your community. So what we did was we met with people within the community and asked, is this a challenge? And in almost every community that you go, you will hear that gender-based violence, domestic violence is a challenge. And you really hear people say, well, it's that personal, how do I get involved? So we heard from different communities specifically what their needs were. And based on what they expressed, we've developed programs within that community. So we went up to Beach and we met with people and we did a 3-day training with community members, just regular, random people who live within Beach, men and women, around the issue of violence, even expressing it. Because, yeah, people know that violence exists, but they don't know how to deal with things like anger and control and conflict issues. And really the language we use as a society has become very violent. How we speak to each other, how we speak to our children, how we speak to strangers, you know? And it's about those things, giving people the tools and the skills to treat with each other differently, you know? And so for us, that's critical. And we, in terms of survivors, and we found it important to also work with people who are doing the work. So we've provided support to Families in Action, to provide a domestic violence support group in 2015. This year they're working with young people in schools, 25 girls in 4 schools in Trinidad and Tobago, teaching them about peer mentoring so that they would go and talk to the other girls in their school around the issue of violence. So if we want to create a movement, and that's what I think Make It Stop is a movement, we have to start from our very young, provide support for both men and women, boys and girls, to get, because we cannot address gender-based violence unless we have men at the table. Because they are critical,
Correct,
they are
very true.
half of the challenge, you know. And it's really about how we speak, because when you talk to men, when you talk to boys, they say, you don't know, she pushed my buttons, you know.
Yes.
And
Yes,
we
that's very
all,
true.
you know, and so it's really that language, and I'll let you, because I see you have something to jump in and say.
I'm sorry. It's so true that is really the challenge that we're facing right now. It is about the language. How do we communicate with them differently? Because we can go at it one community at a time, but I decided, I mean, yes, I am one mom, and it's an ugly situation, but I had years in the communication industry, you know, in advertising and in messaging. And the fact is that if we continue to go one house at a time, that's okay. But it is not going to hit them at the frequency at which the media and everything else is hitting them, whether it is Trump and Pokemon right now. I mean, nobody's going to be really listening to us one community at a time. It's not going to work like that. And Lamika is opening the door really to new initiatives in the way in which we message domestic violence and get it into dialogue, because it's not going to happen
Well,
otherwise.
it's about help. It's about getting it into mainstream media. So we need to go on a break, and we're getting into a whole new topic now, you know, mainstream media partnering with that one-on-one community work.
Right.
So don't go anywhere. We're talking about gender-based violence, domestic violence in the home. You're watching Care. On the break, we were discussing something that you know, really had me thinking. Raquel was telling us the story of your sister being, you know, suited by men. If you're just joining us, we're talking gender-based violence. Raquel has just launched the Lamika Project, and Sharon's been in this thing a while now with PSI Caribbean. Tell us the story about, because, you know, we're always privileged to hear things on the break. Tell our audience the story of you growing up and your sister being suited.
Yeah, it's interesting, and to some extent, you know, it was something that we laughed about, you know, but it's the reality that I'm now facing with a teenage daughter, and the fact that men continue to cross the line.
What's the story? Tell us exactly what you said on the break with
Right.
you walking and, you know, the man.
Right, of course. We were referring to that, to her, and it led to that story. And you know, my mom was carrying two of us. We were young, we were going through town, and there were some guys liming at the side of the street. And my older sister, who was a teenager at the time, was also quite shapely, and of course, they called out to her. And my mom kept her head straight, and but I was very young, and I turned around, and I decided to answer. And as a result, you know, mom just kind of gave me a slap, and she's like, shh, keep quiet, and we walked on. So there was that kind of, you know, the fellas started laughing. It was a big joke. My sister kept her composure. She just walked forward. I was quite young. I didn't understand. But, you know, I had been reprimanded for standing up to the manner in which they were speaking to my sister. And it is difficult now to, as a mom, now seeing it with my daughter. And I tell her, you know, and she keeps her straight face, but it can get rough. And I'm talking about adult males. You know, she's now 15. She's 15 next week. But they look at her, you know, and yeah, she's taller than me. She's shapely. But why is it that this is accepted and it's so difficult to deal with? It has to change.
What stood out with me in that story is that you being reprimanded. Because somehow I feel as if girls at a young age, and this is something that I think parents are not necessarily recognizing. You know, I posted on Facebook recently about combing my daughter's hair, because no is no. And we don't somehow teach girls that it's okay to be spunky and it's okay to stand up for yourself, you know. So take lash, because your job is to shut up. You know, and we have this
Correct.
way where girls are not supposed to be bold-faced and stand up and say, hey, that's what you just did there ain't right. And that's what stood out to me in that story, you know.
Right.
You know,
What was very important to mention, though, and one of the main reasons that, you know, kind of led me, I kept going right back to getting to this point, was because I had to see and witness my mother after her entire life really being in, she was, you know, she received it. That she finally decided to stand up to my abuser on one occasion. I was fully pregnant, I was sheltering my other daughter, and baby decided to get it. So it's like, she's up there because she's out front, and that's where the focus was for my abuser. And my mother stepped in, and she stood up, and she said, you're not going to do this to her anymore. And that for me was the change. I said, you know, if she could have done her whole life with this and not done and not said, and she didn't want to see me do it, and I decided I had to break the cycle with my girls. I couldn't allow him to come and go and do as he wanted in their view, because that is ideally what was happening. It was always in their view.
and that, I mean, and that's you talk about the cycle, you know, and that's a big thing, because we look at our mothers and we go, well, they've said nothing, you
Exactly.
know. And I mean, to be honest, I mean, I know our mothers are all wonderful, and there's strength in that in itself to stand up and just like take licks, you know. But what are we really teaching our girls, you know? And then when the woman now sort of like fights back, and I don't mean fight back verbally or physically, but stand up for themselves and say, you know what, I'm not taking this. And as a matter of fact, when I, you know, fight back policy-wise and everything, then somehow we become the crazy people in society.
Yeah.
You know, we end up being the crazy people in society.
And I think it's not only what we teach our girls, is also what we teach our boys, because
Right.
our boys are also exposed to that. And if it's okay, like I remember quite clearly my mother, it was not permissible for my brothers to even think about hitting,
Right.
you know. And it has resulted in men, they're grown men now, that don't hit. And I remember I have one child, I have a son. And I remember quite clearly that I made some deliberate decisions with respect to, I grew up in a household where I had a mom who was under a lot of pressure, who raised us almost single-handedly, and it was the norm to beat. That's what you did, you beat your kids, right? Not realizing that each child takes that same discipline differently. You know, so my friend said, but you didn't get more licks than I did, and I considered that I was abused physically by my mother, right? And I remember very consciously making a decision that Jabari's experience, that's my son's experience, would be completely different from the one. And I had to break the cycle, because I had to raise what I call a sensitive black man, and how we go about doing that, you know? And the responsibility we take as women on what we expect of our sons, allowing our sons to be vulnerable, because we want our girls.
But at the same time, I mean, and I like that in terms of allowing our sons to be vulnerable. But you talk about in front of the children, you know, and if the boys are, so the girls are watching it, but if the boys are watching their dads do it and their moms just sit quietly and do nothing, then aren't we sending that signal to the men that, well, it's okay? Or, well, my mother took it and she stayed quiet, so you should take it and stay quiet.
And I think that's why it's important to have programs that meet youth where they are, because if they're in homes that are destructive, that they feel powerless, because usually boys will step up for their mothers and then sometimes be the brunt of the abuse
They
by
do.
their father.
Correct.
As you said,
That's
step
true
up.
as well.
I mean, I can tell, I write children's stories, right? And one interview is Samuel Stafford. Samuel Stafford's story is amazing. He was very strong, he fought all the time, he was good at fighting, and one day he decided, I am not sitting back and watching my mother take another slap. And he stood up. So at 14
Yes.
years old, he
Yeah.
became homeless. His mother kicked him out the house. His mother said, you can't do that to your father.
Yeah.
And she said, for your own protection, you're going to have to leave because it's going to end up a fight between you and him. And you can't do that. You can't be disrespectful to your father like that. You can't fight your father like that. And she used the term, there can only be one man rat in the hole. And he was 14 years old. He became
Correct.
homeless for standing up to his mother,
Correct.
for his mother.
And how sad is that for her? Because we don't know, and there's always that backstory. Because maybe,
What is she going through to make that decision?
and probably
Correct.
to
Of
try to
course,
protect
of
him,
course, of
but to
course.
give up, because I know, I'm not. You would take both of us out, but my son is not going anywhere. So you could imagine the level of her abuse.
Correct.
Yeah.
To be
You know.
able to decide that.
To make that choice to put out your
That's
son.
why we don't normally put ourselves in their shoes and think through the situation. And I did reach a point, let's say like about a year ago, when I said, if anyone came to me after 2 years of just trying to reason and said they were in a situation, I would have told them, stay in it. I'm not lying to you, and it may bring tears to my eyes too, but I would have, where I was, the extreme, the extremities of what the children were going through and why they were constantly the victims. They were actually the targets when I stood out. And then I reached the no contact situation because it was 3 years of counseling. And I said, look, there's no way you're going to get through to him, and he's not going to do the counseling. He's not going to try. And I realized that even still, keeping the children in it, they were still going to get it. And that's what, that I had to stop it entirely. And it finally got to the point where access was stopped as well. So, it's, the change is not going to happen, as I say, one step at a time. It's going to have to be a national campaign. It's going to have to be a much broader, wider educational type campaign.
This is the second time that you brought that up, right? Mainstream media versus the smaller groups, you
Yes.
know, and because I've done this smaller mentoring for a long time, and it's tiring. It's tiring to constantly, I mean, from the time I became a single mom, and then I became a full-time single mom, and it was like, how in the world are you able to be a single mom, single-funded, and go off on your own? How in the world are you able to be a single mom, single-funded, and homeschool? So it's constantly mentoring, and it is very tiring to reach 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And, so I definitely agree with you that somehow this message needs to hit mainstream media, and it
Yes.
needs to become,
Yes.
in your face. I see the TTPS doing a lot of work, at least on their Facebook page,
Yeah.
Of course, we've just had the ad with, what your human rights are and whatnot.
Yeah.
But we definitely need to get into the mainstream media, stop it now, that, your
And
campaign.
then, along with telling people to stop, is providing them with the resources,
Yes.
which is
So it
what-
has to be a partnership. It absolutely has to be a partnership, because then after,
Yes.
there's no, because then with the
You reach the
policy
same-
level, you don't want to go, okay, we have all these grand things, and it's a lot of talk, but then when we go to make
Correct.
make a report, the system is not there. Or after everyone speaks up, then we don't have guys like you to be able to do all the mentorship and the work after. So it has to be a partnership.
And then it's about actually having access to the information. I had a fair amount of access, and I had the ability to be articulate enough to say, look, I can't afford counseling. Where can I get it free? I can't, I'll go to the clinics. I've lost my day. Okay, I'm going to lose my job. I'll sell the car. I did what I had to do, because at the end of the day, I found a way. There's so many women, and I have to refer to one specific situation because I had just been through my 3-year-old, having to face the reality that I had been to Children's Authority because I was told I had to go. I was told, okay, I went to 2 separate police stations, and I had been turned away, and I had said, okay, you have to go all the way to Brasso. I said, okay, I went to Brasso. That became and I thought to myself, I had to think of another individual in my shoes, that if I did not come forward with my story, with the evidence, for people to see how impossible we are making for other people who may not have the resources I had to
Correct.
fight to this extent to protect my children.
Agreed.
How were they doing it? And that's why I say that very emotionally. I would have said, stay in it. And I had to create an alternative to how the networks, how we could network, for all these separate groups to become readily available in a new forum immediately and boycott the bureaucracy. I saw it as bureaucracy. And, High Court is the lawyer's playing field. I'm being very frank. It's a nightmare. And if you don't have the resources, you cannot survive in it without losing everything. And you spoke about that when we were talking casually outside about what your mom would have had to settle for. And so many women came forward when I decided to just go out with my story. So many private messages were, I took whatever little. And these are men that were very well off, doing well, similar in the situation that I'm in. And they would not support. I need possible surgery for one child right now. Last year it was a heart murmur with my 3-year-old. And he said, well, just sit and wait until you can see her at Mount Hope out of just anger and hurt. And he himself, he needs the help. We all need the help. Families aren't going to get there. It's both the perpetrators as well as the victims that need to be brought together and fixed.
And then even when you're talking about the same children, because what are we going to do? Because they have grown up and they've seen this. And on some level, and they realize the resilience of women. Yes, be resilient, but it's to also, when through our youth empowerment program, which I'm going to jump in and talk about.
Yes, because we're going to show that video. So, because I'm trying to give you guys some time to speak, right? But I know that I really want to show this video. So let's show the video. I think our director, are we ready to show our video on the youth empowerment? All right, so we're going to watch this video first, and then you're going to talk a little bit about the youth empowerment program that you guys have.
Hi, good morning. We're here at YTEP Maloney, where we just spent the last 12 weeks rolling out our youth empowerment program. And we're going to spend the next few minutes hearing from them what they learned from the program. We're going to be rolling the program out in institutions and schools across Trinidad and Tobago. And we would like to ask you at this point to join PSI Caribbean and the students at YTEP Maloney to make it stop.
This program, which is the Youth Empowerment Program, empowerment is not foreign to YTEP. That is what we do.
A program such as this is absolutely necessary. We have grown tremendously in terms of understanding gender-based violence, what it is, and what part we can play in making it stop.
PSI Caribbean, PSI across the world is dedicated to the health needs of those that we serve.
And we need to find ways to spread the word with respect to what we can do to make it stop.
Gender-based violence is something that's very serious in society now, and it's something that we should really look into and consider and really take it seriously.
What really stuck out to me was the physical violence, because we actually have a lot of that in our schools, and I realized this is a very good program that you can go to schools and help those children.
I learned how to socialize with other people and not to judge anyone.
And all the topics that we had touched on, somewhere down the line, it was a part of your life, and you could have tested hands-on and say, yes, you know what, I was going through that, or I am going through that.
PSI really helped me as a young adult to come out and speak out, especially on different aspects like abuse and relationships, communication within your relationship. That's very important.
You should really start with the youth, young, 12 to 17, 12 to 18, because they are the ones coming up and they are the ones that need to learn.
It's just that the schools have a lot of, physical violence, and that is what really takes place. So I'd say the physical violence.
I would like the program to be more in secondary schools.
If they go in schools, it would be really good, to give a different aspect as to how you should speak about yourself, give you a proper self-esteem.
Keep doing what you all are doing, because we had a lot of persons who weren't open to sharing their emotions and feelings with strangers. And to the end of the course, everybody had a voice.
We are adamant that you can make a change in your family, in your society, and we want to keep hearing back from you.
And that's the most important thing. What we can do to reduce significantly the violence that is taking place in our society. And that is the importance of a program such as this.
We can end gender-based violence. Make it stop.
We can end gender-based violence. We can make it stop.
Correct.
Tell us
Exactly.
about the program.
So we, as I said, according to our ecological model, our approach, and we did a lot of research as well. If you want more information on PSI Caribbean, I will say go on our website. We did research with 723 women. We went door to door and did extensive a survey, and then we also did in-depth interviews with survivors as well as focus groups with young people. So a lot of what all of what PSI does is evidence-based, and measuring, monitoring, and evaluation is a huge component of part of the global and local PSI. So even when we talked about, as I said, a couple of years ago we talked to people and they said the gap was prevention among young people. And so we put together a technical advisory group because we didn't want to do anything, again, we're very much into getting experience and hearing from people who've been doing work and been working among young people. So we put together a technical advisory group. We got this incredible consultant to look at models, global models of what existed around prevention and young people. She compiled a curriculum, and then we said, okay, it has to make sense to our youth. So we did a pilot test with 15 youth over the course of a week, for them to tell us if the language is appropriate, if the activities are appropriate, because this curriculum is not a go in and we stand up and we teach you something. It's totally activity-based. From the time they come to a session, and our sessions are around values, communication, what is gender-based violence, what are healthy relationships, because if we're telling people to move away from unhealthy relationships, what does a healthy relationship look like?
Especially when our society just doesn't show it,
Correct.
because we cannot just see it anymore. And that's that, so now we have to teach it, because it's not something that just see example.
And then again, we're dealing with a society, well, it's a global issue, where we really can't say as much to keep their attention. It had to be, you have to use keywords to get to them. And even recently, the love not licks concept, at home, we have this little thing of, love is a verb. The kids amongst themselves, and I'm dealing with the teenager, the middle child, and the toddler. And she says it too. It's an action. Love isn't you just tell me you love me. Right?
How do you
that,
show it?
right, so when we tell the general public love not lick, so we put it on a bumper sticker, are we really telling them what they need to hear if when they don't really, or they have not from very young, learned love?
Of course, because now,
and the attention.
Because we've learned that licks is love.
Correct.
We've learned that licks
if you
is
don't
love.
lick me, you don't love me.
Yeah,
and you
because that's a way of discipline.
Correct.
So, kudos to you guys for teaching what is a healthy relationship, because we no longer know what is a healthy relationship. We watch on television that, oh my gosh, they love each other. Me and my 6-year-old, if we're watching a movie, and the girl starts to look at the guy with fluttery eyes, she says they're in love. And so now I'm starting to teach her that this mainstream media thing of what love is. It's not love, it's sort of like we now have to re-educate, because they're not seeing from day to day examples of what real love looks like.
And letting them know that conflict is a part of all relationship. You and I won't
Absolutely.
always agree.
Absolutely.
But how do we navigate? How do we share our differences without it becoming verbally abusive, without me trying to break you? Because that's it. It's all, again, and that's the notion of gender, this notion of power. The only way I could feel powerful is if somebody feels powerless. And to realize that for healthy relationships, that's not necessary. And then a key component of the curriculum is, what do you do if you find yourself in an environment of violence? How to be an active bystander without putting yourself at risk. Because young people will tell you they feel helpless.
And correct. And the kids, in my situation, the kids observing it as well too, they felt powerless. They were actually the ones that had to stop and say, Mom, no more. We don't want no more reasoning, no more trying to reach. They had to be the ones to say stop. which is sad, because there I was trying to really find the best solution, and always kind of finding, as a mom, which is what you do. You mediate amongst them, you're going to do it as well in relationships, and you do have to compromise. But I had to reach the point where I realized I was compromising too much.
Correct.
We have to go and pay some bills.
Okay. Bills paying time.
Yes, bills paying time. Don't go anywhere. We're talking gender-based violence on care.
Trinidad and Tobago.
We're back. We had no idea. Director didn't tell us we're back. So you guys get to hear what goes on during our break. So we're talking gender-based violence on care today. Joining us, we have Sharon from the PSI Caribbean. We have Raquel from the Lamika Project. Right, guys, so we're talking gender-based violence. We're talking mainstream media versus, the mentorship. We're talking youth empowerment, preventing it. And we're talking about the examples. You also have, you guys have started this whole Stop It Now campaign.
Make It Stop.
Make It Stop campaign. Right. Tell us about that campaign.
And so we wanted to brand. And that's PSI is also big about branding. So we had our Got It, Get It campaign, which was our HIV
Get It. Okay.
You remember Got It, Get It. So that's it. That, everybody knew the Got It, Get It. They may not know PSI Caribbean, but they knew the campaign. And so our Make It Stop brand, it's the same thing. And it really was to kind of have something, a movement, so that people could wrap their heads around, so that all aspects of the project would tie back to the brand, which is Make It Stop. And I'm trying to remember, what was your question again?
Just tell us about the campaign.
Right.
What we can probably do then is have our director show the flyer, the Make It Stop flyer.
Correct.
Director, can you show the Make It Stop flyer, please?
And this is, we try to capture the entire ecological model into one flyer. So you see that we talk about transforming negative gender norms.
Before we go into talking about it, because you use a big word, and I always say that, our audience is a broad audience. So I want you to explain what is that whole using the entire ecological.
Okay, so when we talk about an ecological model, it's really a model of life, right? So in very simple terms, a society is made up of many different parts. So we have the individuals, that's you and I, we're individuals, and then we are impacted and affected as individuals. We also operate within communities. So even me as an individual, my values as part of a community. So you'll sometimes go into certain communities and you see a community culture. You see, and then, and you see it really strongly in rural communities as opposed to urban. Even urban, whether it's the night basketball, all of that. And then you have a societal community. So as a community, we vote. So we have an impact on our greater society. And then, of course, institutions. Institutions play a huge role. And then we shape, all of these factors shape our policies, right? Because we try to create what we call enabling environments that allow our system to function in healthy ways. So when we talk about the ecological model, I believe that if we can impact you, young people, on an individual level, arm you with the information and the attitude and the positive behaviors, you could go into your community, whether your community is a school, your churches, we have to hold our institutions accountable, because we talk about institutions like churches, which we think are supposed to carry out a certain role, but we have to also demand what we want those institutions, how we want them to serve us, correct?
That is very important. That actually, I think, is the key to it, because if you do as I did, which is one of, I think, my greatest regrets, I trusted too much. I trusted for too long. So, there was a lot of unnecessary, exposure to damage. And if you as an individual can become, I trusted the system, and I I regret that to some extent. I think that we have to somehow explain to or express or teach and educate so that they can empower themselves to create the changes, to create their own boundaries. And yes, it gets worse. I've created boundaries and then the violence escalated. But then, as I said, we have to now give them maybe a whole new forum so that the resources that are there can be represented, you know, so that it's back in the households and they know that. Because it's not readily available now. It's not just about a television campaign and it's on the radio. It has to be at all aspects, social media, mobile, messaging. It has to be.
But as Sharon said, we need to start to demand from the institutions now.
And even within communities, because even when you call the police, because, you know, and I always try to look at both sides, because, you know, you'd have people calling and they respond, and then you have women going back. Because I always talk about it relapses apart, because I will think I am ready, but I may not be ready. And it's also to be able to empathize with people, because I may think I'm ready to leave her, and then I think, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then I say, okay, maybe I'll go back and give him one more chance. You know, but that puts a burden on the system. But also, what's the responsibility of community? What is the responsibility of our neighbors, you know? And how do we provide them so that if, you know, stuff is going on in the household, do I feel as a man, a next door neighbor, that I could say, hey, Ryan, what's going on over there? Boy, come and go shoot some ball with me. You know what I mean? How can we diffuse these situations? But people have to be taught how to do that
comfortably.
So we have it. So we have the thing on the screen. You know, our ladies are talking. You know, they're getting there. They're going, and I don't like to interrupt them. So, you know, what are we seeing on the screen here?
And so this is really depicting what I was talking about.
Okay.
So we talk about
this. The first bit of the flyer. What is that?
The top talks about cultivating community-based approaches to preventing gender-based violence.
Okay.
So how do we support people within communities? Because
how do we? Tell me.
But they tell us. So I say that I went.
Tell me what they've told you.
Right. So I went to a community in East Trinidad, and we were talking. We had a whole session, and we did what we call invisible theater. So they didn't know that somebody was going to act out gender-based violence in the audience. You know, they came in and then they had this, and it was two women. It was a mother and a daughter, and it was very verbal, until one of the men in the groups jumped up and said, what's going on, you know, calm down. And then they revealed that they were actors. But that's to get people to see, you know, face it, because then they started to talk about suicide.
We have just about, I mean, I don't mean to cut you. I mean, I love the discussion, but I want, give me some point forms, you know, what are some of the things that we can do to cultivate community-based approaches?
So one of the things that they talked about doing was starting a community hotline.
Okay.
So if you see trouble or you sense trouble, you can call a person in the community who can then reach out, because you may not feel comfortable enough to call an authority. So that was their like a huge thing about setting up, and this came from them.
Anything else?
And what we heard about in another rural community this time, they talked about even having their activities, making gender-based violence part of the normal topic.
Okay.
Right. So not taking it out of the closet, really taking gender-based.
Removing taboo.
And then we talked about supporting women and girls experiencing violence. So we have 13 shelters, and I think that's what you spoke to, that there are mechanisms out there. What we learned from our research was that women are less likely to just run to a shelter because they have children, etc. So what they will first do is probably go to their best friend or their parent and say, this is going on.
Someone that you can trust.
And then what happens? Go back now.
Always. You get, at first, I mean, the truth is, you make your bed, you lie in it. You hear that sometimes from parents telling their kids, you know. And, I mean, as if we don't want to touch on the child marriages and go in that direction right now. But the fact is that you know, it is a societal issue. You know, we've got to deal with it culturally. We've got to decide.
And so what are other ways that we can support women?
And so I think what's important, given that who we turn to our friends and our parents, is to educate and make awareness of those people, knowing that you may be a potential support person.
Okay.
Because you may not know
in
that
advance.
now. In
yes,
advance.
That's true.
So we arm you with information, so you could say, you know what, girl, let me go with you. Let me call 1-800.
So very quickly, one or two things that someone who is that support system, what is a bit of advice that we can give?
I would say listen and don't judge. We
Right.
love to tell people what to do. We always feel we could fix your problem.
Okay.
And sometimes they may need to listen, you need to listen and then decide. Psychosocial support is a huge part of our youth empowerment program. We have
Okay.
a psychologist that works with our youth while we're training them.
Right.
You know, and so to be able to know the resources, which is actually on the back of the card.
Yes.
You know, who to call, and you know.
Right.
So I think that's important. And then
Okay,
we talk
so
about
create an enabling environment for the uptake of GBV services.
And what that basically means is that you have people providing services, right, currently. What do we do to make it easier for women to get in and access the system?
Correct.
Yeah?
What do we do? You're
Well,
asking a lot of questions, but I want the answers.
Well, what we did in December 2014 is we actually had a training for frontline service providers.
Okay.
To train them on how
Right.
better, because again, we feel that people are in positions they must know. People are overwhelmed, burnt out, and have their own issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes constant retraining is important.
It's needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have transform negative gender norms among youth and their family. That's our youth empowerment
Right,
program.
yes. Of course, and that speaks for itself, it's just a matter of transforming the way that our young people talk to each other, talk to their parents, how their parents talk to them, that whole, as you say, we have a violent
Right.
culture.
And the curriculum, I will tell you, is not a one-off. It's not a 3-hour workshop.
Okay.
It is a 12-session over 3 months. So
Okay.
we meet with youth for 90 minutes to 2 hours once a week, discussing a particular aspect of the program, say unhealthy relationships. They go home and they reflect on that. They journal, they come back and they share. We tell them, go home and practice a skill that you learned.
Right.
Very
and come
good.
and tell us how it worked.
Okay.
So it's that constant reinforcement. And then, of course, increase public awareness and advocacy.
All right,
For
yeah.
a concerted, which is what we're all trying to do and what your group hopefully
It's
will
hope-
try to
correct.
pull together. And I think it's important, we all know the problem exists. We all want to do something, but, it's not trying to do it fragmented, as you told me outside.
Okay,
Right.
let's pay our last set of bills, and then we'll come back and close up. Don't go anywhere. We're talking gender-based violence on Care Today. Hi, if you're just joining us, we're talking gender-based violence. We're about to wrap up. So what we want to do is give the audience a way to contact PSI Caribbean and give the audience a way to contact the Lamika Project. As we try to make gender-based violence a less taboo topic, we try to empower our youth so that it becomes something where we don't even need that facility anymore, because it's just our kids are not growing up violent. So, Director, may I please have the PSI Get Help Now page? I'm looking at it here, but I don't know if my cameraman can get it. So we just want to give the audience some information. Domestic Violence Abuse Hotline. Are these your program? Are these your numbers?
No.
Or you've just compiled some of the numbers?
Exactly. So we
Okay.
wanted, if you're in trouble, so this is what we give out when we go into community.
Right.
So when we leave you with something.
Good. Yes, and I think we've posted some of this information as well, on our Facebook page before when we spoke about the domestic abuse, because it's all there. But then, of course, Raquel, you would say that it's all there, you know about it, and when you get there, it's a different story.
It is. It's very challenging and it's
So
discouraging as well.
Raquel,
I think that we just want, what would be great is if we could get new people coming forward with their stories to, start by just collecting a lot of new information and so on, and then creating a new database, with the social
Raquel,
media,
did you
et cetera.
try calling the domestic violence abuse hotline?
We did, and we've had the counseling, we've had some assistance, we've had, we've actually had quite a lot of good feedback. You make 1 or 2 visits, you bring
not
the
have to be
children in,
political on
we've
my
dealt
show.
with. We've been through, and the police have been very helpful, and then, as I say, you reach the JP, they give you bad advice by the time you get before the magistrate, and then you're there 4 times, there's no judge in the 9th court, you don't have the money to stay, so you've got to withdraw your petition, for a protection order, and that's the reality. So what I'd like to do is first start my project by inviting as many people to kind of come forward as well and explain their situation, so that I can then go back to persons like yourself and so on and other groups and see how we can again readdress it and see how we can put probably some new life into it. But then the second arm of it is to resolve a new way of bringing the topic forward. again, it's part of your initiative, but it would be new creative ways to really, it's not going to be the generic media like how we have the domestic violence brochures that sit at family court and it doesn't get it, it's at the police station, etc., but it's not in the homes, it's not there, to have that constant reminder.
Now, legal aid, I see legal aid as one of your numbers that are listed here. But not everyone can take part of this. Unfortunately, guys, we've run out of time. So it's all up there. We can find Raquel. How do we find you, Raquel, for the Lamika project if we want to get involved?
Well, immediately we've set up an email address, thelamikaproject@gmail.com, and it's LAMICA, so thelamikaproject@gmail.com. You can send us a message, let us know what your situation is or how you can help. And that would be the first way to start.
And you could always go to www.psicaribbean.com, www.psicaribbean.com, and every single thing I've talked about, you will find a lot of information and videos, etc. in our project.
Thank you very
much.
much.
So much, guys. You're watching Kate. Thank you, guys, for joining us.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
again.
us.
Thank you. You're welcome. Was it good?